Mike Steinel, my old friend, man. It's so good to see you.
Right back at you. It's good to see you too.
Oh, man. It's so funny, Mike, because we've known each other for a long time. And just a couple weeks ago, Hildegard Froelich, Dr. Hildegard Froelich from the University of North Texas, had a little shindig up there in Denton, Texas, celebrating her 50 years in Texas. And of course, she was my major professor during my doctoral days there at North Texas. And sure enough, man, I go up. She invited me to the shindig. I go up there in Denton, and who do I see? Who do I run into? Mike Steinel. What a great blessing, man.
There was a lot of cool people there from all different aspects of what she's been a great influencer, researcher in music ed for years.
Yeah.
She was actually a professor when I was a student in 1977.
At
I believe
UNT?
so, yeah. And
wow, yeah.
I could have taken one of her classes because I was music ed like you, because when I went through North Texas, there was no jazz degree at the master's level. So I took a master's in master's in music education with an emphasis in jazz, which is similar to what you took.
Isn't that funny, man? Well, yeah, because when I was there, they didn't have a doctorate degree in jazz at that time. They had a master's degree in jazz, but they didn't have the doctorate degree. And so my whole doctorate was exactly that. It was an emphasis in jazz, doctorate in music education, emphasis in jazz studies. And so her classes, it's interesting. That's what kind of got me intrigued with all that, because there were classes like sociology of music and psychology of music. And I was like, what? Psychology of music? So what the heck is this all about?
It's pretty interesting.
And it was fantastic. Yeah, very interesting. So, but then, at North Texas, then this young stud came in. I'm there taking my graduate classes. This young stud comes in and teaches his first class in jazz pedagogy. Jazz pedagogy. I signed up for that class, man, right away. I said, jazz pedagogy, I'm all in. And I show up for class, and who's the teacher? You, my friend. That was like your first year there as on faculty.
Yeah, I'd been teaching 8 years, but they told me the week before that class started, oh, by the way, we want you to teach pedagogy. Well, here's what it was. Rich Madison, my predecessor, had been gone for a year. So it hadn't been taught for a year.
He took the Florida job, yeah.
And there were people finishing up. And normally I was expecting, actually, that was always when I took it, it was always in the spring. But since he had been gone, they hadn't offered it. And so Neil Slater, the chair at the time, said, yeah, we're going to offer it in the fall. I found out maybe a week, because a couple of people had come, hey, I'm leaving in January. I need this class. This is all I need, And it might have been you, actually, maybe. I don't know. But I tell you what, that first class, then I taught it at least 32 other times. And it changed over time quite a bit. But that first group was a really great group of students.
Oh, man, that was fun.
I remember the names, Charlie Gray and you and Chris Berg was in that.
Let
me see. Randy Ham, Tim Ishii.
Yes.
A bunch of guys.
Man, it was a great class. I think I got an A. I think you gave me an A, man.
Yeah, I think you did get an A. You worked really hard.
I think I got an A. Yeah. So, okay, Mike, look, here's what I want to do before we get into all the jazz stuff and jazz studies and all the things that you're currently doing and working on, which are fabulous. I want you to wind back the clock a little bit for us, and for all the listeners, Jazz Piano Skills listeners. Share with us your childhood, how your family life, how you got into music, all that stuff. Give us your background. So, my friend, the microphone is yours. Anxious to hear your story.
Okay. I'm from the center of the United States. I was born in Smith Center, Kansas, which is actually quite near the geodesic center of the continent, not the continent, but the United States. And it's different than the geographic because it has something to do with Alaska and Hawaii not being in there. But anyway, from the center that, and grew up in small towns. My parents were teachers. My dad was a band director, my band director, and he taught choir music at times. And my mom was a high school librarian. We grew up in, I grew up in a town of finished high school in a town of about 2,000, very small town. But one of the things about that is that I feel lucky because I was able to do a lot of things, a lot of different things. I was just thinking about a play that I was in. I was in plays. I was in the choir. I wasn't very athletic, although in middle school or in junior high, I did go out for everything and enjoyed it. I wish I could have been more competitive, but anyway, that was the environment. My dad was my trumpet teacher for, I don't know, until I was a freshman in high school. And then he would drive me over to the college that I later went to, Emporia State University. It was called Kansas State Teachers at the time, for weekly trumpet lessons, or every other week, I think it was. But, before that, he gave me a trumpet when I was 6. So I've been doing the trumpet thing a long, long time. And we did piano lessons, until when, 5th grade. We moved to Wichita so my dad could get a master's degree at Wichita State. And that was a rough year financially because my mom went back to teaching, but, women's salaries were horrible, and they still are. And but anyway, I did have a trumpet long before that, but it was around that time, that I really got interested in the trumpet, as I realized that I was kind of good at it, and just practiced a lot.
Was your dad a jazzer?
No, he was not really. The joke used to be, he played dance gigs, but he wasn't a good improviser. And his big joke was, oh yeah, I took a really hot solo on, what was it? He always said the same tune.
Alley Cat.
No, it was, the lady is, no. I can't remember, and then he would just sing the melody. He says, yeah, I took a really hot solo last night and he would just sing the melody. And I didn't even know what the tune was at the time. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird. But he was, a big part of, in high school, even in, 7th grade, I started organizing bands. Like first band was a band called Susan and the Bachelors. We call them garage bands. We didn't really, have guitars in the beginning, but later I played in some sort of rock band all the way through high school, running it and booking it. So I became kind of an entrepreneur early on and really liked that, and was more interested in some ways in doing that than necessarily playing the trumpet. Although I knew that ultimately I was going to go to college and learn, I wanted to be an orchestral trumpeter. But in high school, I played guitar one year when we didn't have a guitarist. I played bass another year when we didn't have a bassist. Right, I played piano another year when we didn't have a pianist. Oh, and I was going to tell you, I quit piano in the 5th grade when we moved to Wichita and didn't have much money. And my parents said, now, do you really want to keep with the piano? You don't have to. And I think it was a sigh of relief when I said, no, I don't want to do it. Save some money. But it's a big regret because I'm a pretty good pianist. I would say, just to be realistic, I'm better than what you'd call an arranger's piano.
Yeah. Well, all you jazz horn players, man, y'all make me mad because y'all sit down and start playing changes and laying out voicings and.
Well, back before there was a lot of play along record. How's this song go? You'd have to bang it out on the piano,
Right.
But anyway, so I played in high school and kept doing the rock band thing all the way through college. And at one,
so what were you playing? What were you playing, Mike? Like a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and Chicago stuff. Yeah, right. That's
And then I spent 3 years kind of on the road after college with different bands. One was playing disco, so we would do we did Doobie Brothers. Steely Dan was just hot, so we do Steely Dan. We would do Chicago. We do some Chicago. We do some Blood, Sweat, and Tears. We would do some Earth, Wind, and Fire. It was horn bands mainly, but the last one I played in before I started my own group out of that era was where I played keyboard, and they hired me because I could do trumpet and keyboard, not often at the same time, a la Chuck Mangione. But
Yeah.
that was my main interest. And then somewhere along the line, a friend of mine, I was running a band. We had a gig. We worked a lot. We were a trio that could be a quartet. By that, I mean I played piano, I played keyboards, bass player, drums, and then I would play trumpet. And we were doing, that was back in the days of Mr. Magic. I don't know if you remember that song, Grover
Right.
Washington. And
Washington,
we were doing dance stuff, but we could also play jazz concerts. And I was booking us with, in that thing. And a friend of mine, and it was hard. It was hard to make any money. That's all the only income we had coming in. A friend of mine said, I'm going down to visit North Texas. And why don't you come along? And that was in the fall of '76. And we visited on Election Day of '76, because that was the day Carter got elected.
Yeah.
I remember that, which was a surprise. And can you still hear me? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm getting a weird.
Oh,
it's
no,
just my tinnitus. That's all it is. It's really loud sometimes. Like
you're getting old, Mike. You're getting old.
No, too many rock gigs. But anyway, so
Too many rock, yeah.
yeah, and I went down there not expecting to be. I don't want to go back to college. And I got down there and it was just, I heard the 1 o'clock band and I went like, wow,
Yeah.
this is amazing.
Yeah.
And then we went out and hung with some people and it was like, wow, these are really good musicians down here. And so I dropped everything and moved down in January, started school, and then, spent some time in the 1 o'clock and learning how to arrange and just getting better. And then I was very lucky that I got a job back in where I'd grown up as a jazz artist in residence at Bethel College.
Okay, Mike, wait a minute. Before you talk a little bit more about your North Texas experience, I want you to go back to you were at your dad took you to Emporia State University.
Yeah.
For trumpet lessons. Mm-hmm. Was this with a jazz guy there?
No, they had no jazz guy really. It was just a trumpet teacher. It was a very good trumpet teacher, Peter Churchek, who was very supportive of the jazz. And I can't remember who, different people did the jazz band. And eventually they turned one of the jazz bands over to me when I was a senior, and which was kind of strange. But I remember Pete Churchek once, he said something interesting in a lesson, which was like, I have to remind myself of how naive I was. And I said, yeah, I took a solo yesterday in the jazz band. I wasn't really happy with it, And he goes, well, how are you working on your jazz, on your improvisation? And I'm going like, yeah. I said, how are you practicing your improvisation? I'm going like, what? I'm supposed to practice the improvisation? Up until then, I was just, by the way, the thing that got me into it, I just assumed that I was going to learn to play classical trumpet really good and get a job in a symphony. That would have been fine. Now I realize that would have never happened because I was not that good, with that end of it. I always had trouble with my chops. It took years to work it out. But anyway, in the school, in my freshman year, there were 2 African-American guys. One was later my roommate, and he, a bass player, tuba player, bass player, really good bass player. And the other was a vet, Jimmy D. Staten. He was just gotten out of the Army. He'd been in Nam, and he was a jazz pianist, And
Wow.
they would jam in these little practice rooms. And so I would just stand outside and listen one day. What are you doing? Come on in. And then after about 15 minutes, the guy said, get your horn. Come on, get your horn. So I just tried to play. I'd watch his left hand, see what he was doing,
Yeah, right, right.
And that was when I decided, this is more fun. I was always doing the rock and roll thing, the rock band, that was.
Yeah, right.
And, but then that's when we started to think that maybe, and that's when I started a band in college that was more like approaching a lot of original tunes, but they were approaching
Yeah,
jazz
yeah,
tunes, you know.
right.
I can't remember what the models were. Maybe Traffic might have been the model. So jam bands, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
not
yeah.
at the time. I thought like the swing, ding, ding, and ding stuff was kind of corny, you know. So later I came around, you know, to that.
Yeah.
But then when I went to
So
North, go ahead.
yeah, yeah. So now, okay. So now we're back at North Texas. So you went down to North Texas to check it out. You're blown away. Great musicians as always, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you just went down there with a buddy down to North Texas to check it out.
Yeah, we stayed a couple of days, then came back,
Yeah.
and then I decided I want to go there, and I got accepted, like right at the last minute to come in January, you know, and I just showed up and auditioned for band, made the 5 o'clock band. Later I moved, and they moved me to the 3. Somebody left. Back then, the bands were. It was for one of the secret to the success of North Texas was during the Vietnam War. The wars, first of all, World War II and the Korean War, allowed a lot of musicians who were a little older to come back and use the GI Bill to go to school, and they learned how to play and these were like working musicians, you know.
Yeah.
Like the first lab band had. Herb Ellis was in the first lab band.
Yeah.
You know, and
Blows my mind.
you know, then Jack Peterson. These were older guys, so it was always a really good band. And then the Vietnam War came, and what happened is, just to keep their deferments, guys who would normally be leaving school to go with Buddy Rich or Stan Kenton or, you know, like Lou Marini was there for 8 years,
Yeah.
and the band. So, but anyway. Later on, by the time I got there, the people were coming in and out, like leaving to go with Stan Kenton. Like the band I saw, the 1 o'clock I saw in the fall was completely different because 3 people went with Stan Kenton.
Wow.
You know, Bev Dalkey went with Stan Kenton, and can't remember who else. But it was. So anyway, so I moved up in mid semester.
And, and this was Leon Breeden days, right? Leon Breeden was
Oh
directing
yeah,
1 o'clock.
Leon,
Yeah.
yeah. And we played a lot of gigs, that band. And actually, you know, I always wondered if it was legal. We got paid, you know.
Right.
Matter of fact, Leon Breeden, the first day of the band rehearsal, he handed out the union things, which I think is great. He says, "We're gonna do this right. You're gonna be in the union, because some of the gigs we're going to be able to pay you," and we did. We went to the Spoleto Jazz Festival and played as the house band. The first some year I was in there, we were the house band at the Spoleto Jazz Festival for 3 weeks, I think.
Wow.
And Clark Terry came, and Zoot Sims came, and the singer, baritone, can't think of his name. African American guy, big guy.
Williams, Joe Williams.
Yeah, Joe Williams. Yes.
Yeah.
And who else? The New York Jazz Quartet with Frank West and Tommy Flanagan. Oh, and the highlight of that was 2 nights with Ella Fitzgerald.
Oh my goodness.
We got to play with Ella Fitzgerald. Tommy Flanagan was her pianist when they did the small stuff, and then he conducted the 1 o'clock. And then the second night was outdoors underneath the grotto there on University of South Carolina at Charleston, and with a string orchestra. And Ella Fitzgerald, we did the rehearsal in a little building close to where we were going to play, and she sat there with her big Coke bottle glasses. Her eyes were bad, you know,
right?
Diabetes, I think, and she knitted. Didn't even look at it. She just listened and knitted while Tommy Flanagan ran through the show. And every now and then she would just put her hand to her ear and she'd sing something.
Oh, wow.
But she just listened, you know. It was really lovely. I mean, she was pretty old by that time, you know, but she was healthy still.
Yeah.
And she, unbelievable singing.
Yeah, right.
scat singing, and
Oh
she
my
did
gosh.
7 ballads in a row. I remember she did People, People Who Need People,
People, yeah.
and it was just gorgeous. Anyway, that was a thrill,
Yeah,
and those are the kind of things you got to do if you were in the 1 o'clock back then.
yeah, the North Texas experience, it's absolutely amazing. So, okay, so you finished up at you got your bachelor's degree at master's degree at North Texas.
Masters, yeah.
Yeah, your master's. So after your master's degree, what happened?
I was very lucky. I think before we went out, I think we covered this a little bit. I was able to take a job near my hometown as an artist in residence, and I had 3 jobs. One was to tour with a group, and I did 10 tours in 4. With people like Bill Evans, the tenor player, and Jerry Bergonzi. I hired guest artists to come in. I did 10 tours during that time. And I also worked in the high schools in the area, and I worked at the college. And it was funded by the National Endowment of the Arts. It was a perfect job for me because I didn't know if I really wanted to teach.
Right.
Those 4 years taught me that I did want to teach and that I was kind of good at it. I was and it was I knew this area. I was coming back to these little rural schools, and I kind of knew how to go in there and work with them. I knew what to expect. My boss took a sabbatical. He hired me, took a sabbatical, and before he left, he said, "Oh, by the way, there's one little wrinkle." He says, "It was a new program. It had gone 1 year. The guy that was here last year, the people didn't really like him, so." The schools that need to buy in, 5 high schools had to buy into this thing, and I would go to one each day of the week. And they were 1/4 of my salary, the 5 high schools. He said, none of the schools really want to commit until they know what you're like. And so he said, just go around and do a bunch of clinics. I'm not sure. I think I did at least 20. I might have done 30. I might have gone to 30 schools. I kind of remember them. And that was to little bitty schools where they were playing stocks, and maybe they would have the garage band drummer, and that's where I kind of learned how to teach the rhythm section, because a beginning rhythm section, which helped me later write essential elements for Jazz Ensemble, which has a lot of stuff about drums and bass and piano and guitar. But anyway, that was a great experience. And,
so how did you end up? Was it from there then that you ended up directly joining the faculty at North Texas after that?
No, I did 4 years at Northern Illinois University, which is a great school for music. Great school for music.
Yeah, that's got they have a good jazz program, do they not? They
really do. They really do. And they didn't have a jazz degree. While I was there, I wrote the jazz degree that they have. They've since changed it a lot. They tell me, yeah, we didn't really use what you did. I had a guy tell me that. I said, I wrote the degree when I was there. I said, oh, yeah, we don't do it like that.
You're gone.
As you get older, get used to that. Yeah, we don't do that anymore.
Oh, that's funny, man.
But anyway, that was a great experience because I was in Chicago.
That's right.
And that's when I started. I got together with a few people that I knew from before. One from my hometown, Jack Mouse from Emporia, and 3 other guys, Frank Mantooth, Bill Sears, and Kelly Sill. 2 of them have passed away, but that was a Chicago Jazz Quintet. We did a bunch of touring and recorded an album, and that was really a great group of guys. I had a lot of fun with that group, and I think it was a fine group. But then I got invited to come down and apply for the job at North Texas.
So your job then at North Texas, was it because Rich Madison? Did you filled Rich Madison's spot then? It was when he went to Florida.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there was 1 year where there was an interim guy, great guy, Brett Savacek.
Oh yeah, Brett, trombonist.
It's really funny. He had this. I got his desk. He was a very fine composer and arranger.
Yes.
And everything was cleared out of the desk except these little pencils that were too small to be. He just, back in the day, you wrote with pencils. There were like 12 little Yeah, and they were the nice, the pencils you used to buy just for writing music.
Yeah,
I
right.
think they came from the same people that printed the music paper,
Yeah,
and that was so funny. And most of them didn't have any eraser left, so that's a sign of a good composer. You know that.
yeah, right. Yeah, no
No
eraser.
eraser,
Yeah,
no erasers.
he's out east, is he? Is he not? I thought he was like,
Oh yeah, he's in the New York school, and I'm gonna. It'll come to me.
yeah,
A great New York school.
yeah, Pots. No,
Potsdam, exactly.
yeah,
Yeah,
Potsdam. Yeah, that's right.
very fine music program there.
Yeah,
He's retired since, and
he
really
was
a
a
neat guy.
yeah,
I wish I'd gotten to know him better.
yeah, he was a University of Iowa guy. He was University of Iowa before. Then he went to came down to North Texas, and
Oh, is that right?
yeah, yeah,
Iowa's turned out a lot of great musicians.
yeah. University of Iowa's got a good jazz program as well. Yeah,
Are you from Iowa?
I'm from Illinois, across the
Oh,
river,
okay.
across the Mississippi River from Iowa, though. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I grew up in the Midwest. See, so that's when I first met you.
What town in
I knew
Illinois?
you. I knew you were a Midwest guy. I grew up in a town called Rock Island. You know Johnny
Oh, I
Cash,
know
the
Rock Island. Oh,
the
yeah.
Rock Island Lines.
Yeah, I had one of the very interesting week playing at a club. Rock Island's Quad Cities.
That's right.
And we didn't play in Rock Island. I think we played in Davenport. Okay, I'm going to get these. It's Rock Island, Davenport. There's a funny one.
Moline, Bettendorf.
Bettendorf, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we played in, there was a club. You might have known this club. It was a Quonset hut.
Huh.
I think it was called the Cave or something.
Oh yeah. Right.
And
that was it. That was Rock Island, right?
We were warned about the girls from Bettendorf.
Oh, that's
we
too
didn't pay
funny,
any
man.
heed to it, but
That's too funny. Well, you want to know what?
you can bleep that out if you need to.
Hey, you know what? You know what's interesting? Rich Madison, the gentleman that
It's from that
replaced
area.
he went to Rock Island High School. He actually graduated from Rock Island High School with my mother. And what was funny,
Really?
they were in the same class.
How
and
cool.
And you know what's? Here's a funny story. I go down to North Texas, and I'm back home, and I'm talking to my mom, and I said, "Oh man," I said, "Mom, yeah, it's going great. Love it, the improv class," and I said, I'm studying with Rich Madison, and she goes, "That's interesting, Rich Madison." She goes, "I went to school with a Rich Madison, and he was a." She goes, and she said he was a euphonium player. I said, "That's the guy." And she goes, "Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?" So she took a picture of she took a picture of her yearbook, a picture of Rich Madison in the yearbook, and he had a full head of hair. You know, Rich was bald. I always just knew Rich as a bald guy, and he had a full head of hair. And I came back with that picture, and I showed Jack Peterson. Jack Peterson's like, "I'll give you $25 for that picture right now." You know, he was going to do. He was going to do something with it. You know, so
I
anyway,
tell you, Rich and Jack were really great mentors to me when I was a student, and Jack later when I was teaching. I got to teach with him for I think just a semester. He retired, or he took a retirement, then went down and joined Rich in Florida.
Yeah,
but
is he in Arizona now? Is he retired? Is he?
He was, but he was in Florida, Arizona. Now I've just heard he's in Columbus. I think he's living with his daughter in Columbus.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So, okay. So then you came to North Texas. You've been you taught at North Texas for, oh my gosh, Mike, how long were you on faculty?
32 years.
32 years teaching at the University of North Texas.
40 years total teaching.
Wow.
I thought that was a good round number.
That's a great
And
round.
luckily, I mean, just amazingly, I retired right before COVID.
Yeah.
Because I know the stress of teaching during those first semesters of COVID was just amazing. Teaching remote. My wife continued to teach during that, and it was not a good experience for the students. You know, it's just
hard.
It's really, you know, like it was really a tremendous. And then, of course, then our chairman John Murphy passed away or got sick that fall, 19.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of upheaval, and I just kind of missed all that. And they're doing great now. They got a great crop of young people running the deal, and Rob Parton's doing a great job as chair. And
it's rocking.
yeah,
it's rocking.
It's doing great.
So, okay, while at North Texas, you were pretty prolific with your jazz education. I know you've put together some great materials and books. Let's talk about that a little bit. I remember you were working on, what was the first book that you published there while on faculty?
Well, I have, the first one's Building a Jazz Vocabulary, which
that was it.
In some ways, it's what an author shouldn't do. That book was written at a time when it was kind of like, that's a picture in how I was approaching my own development at the time. Mm-hmm. It's a high level book, basically, in a lot of ways. And it isn't appropriate. I'll be the first to admit it's not appropriate for a beginner at all, Right. But it is. I think I was very much interested and influenced at the time by The Craft of Composition by Hindemith. Mm. And The Craft of Composition, the thing about that is the first volume builds a series of ways to evaluate music that are not bound to a genre or a style. In other words, how to evaluate harmony, right. Objective ways to evaluate harmony, and so it wasn't bound to a style. So in building a jazz vocabulary, what I tried to do was to try to build an objective way to practice music that wasn't built on there's some licks in there, but it's really more about mastering the vocabulary that's possible, like in any tonal environment. Right. And I actually didn't, I tried to not use the word scales. Yeah. Yeah. Or chords necessarily, just more like tonal environments. Right. You have, and there's about, I think you could probably boil it down to maybe 6 or 7 tonal environments. Right. And if you can move up and down melodically in skips and steps in any environment, right, then it frees you up just to play what's in your imagination. So that was that. 10 years later, or 9 years later, we came out with a book for beginners, which is Essential Elements for Jazz Ensemble. And that's been a very successful book. And it's a band method. And, in a lot of ways, it assumes the student knows nothing, and for me, that was a really difficult thing to do, to remember what it was like when I didn't even know what jazz was or what, because I've been doing it so long. And I grew up in a musical household. A lot of us don't, a lot of my students, I would ask, did your family play? Not really, but I grew up listening to jazz. My dad had jazz records. He was not a jazz musician, though, but not really knowing what was going on. I remember he took me to a lot of concerts. It was great. I remember a lot of memorable moments. But he took me to a Doc Severinsen concert, and Doc played with the jazz band. No, he played with the concert band. Okay. And then at the end, he played with the jazz band, and in the middle, he played with just a combo. Yeah. And I found out later it was guys that I got to know in Wichita later who were older. They were just jazz cats, Yeah. And I asked my dad on the way home, he played with the orchestra, he looked at music, and he played with the jazz band, he looked at music. And then in the middle, they just played and played and played, and they weren't looking at any music. How'd they do that? Did he have all that memorized? That's a lot of, he played 20 minutes. My dad said, no, he was improvising. Oh, interesting. Yeah, and that's the first time it occurred to me that, what I was doing, when I would sit at the keyboard and mess around or just mess around on the trumpet, that I was improvising, Yeah. But anyway, to get to that frame of mind where, you didn't know anything about jazz and how we could build a method that would work, and Hal Leonard was really good about showing me the vessel to put the information in. I had the information, but I didn't
Yeah.
really have the
Right.
vessel,
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
to do it.
Yeah.
So there's a second book of that, and there's all sorts of supplemental materials. But the book I'm most excited about is the latest one. This is my latest nonfiction book is Running the Changes, which is kind of an encapsulation of everything I taught at North Texas for 32 years.
Wow.
So
And where's that available?
everywhere. It's Hal Leonard, but it's everywhere, anywhere where you can buy books.
Okay, Running the
If you
Changes.
want to support your local merchant, go to Pender's Music.
There you go. So, okay, so your 40 years of teaching, you said a phrase earlier that I want to circle back around to, and then I want you to expound on it a little bit.
Okay.
You said that you had somebody asked you, I think it was a private teacher, or some teacher that you had through high school, asked you point blank, how are you, Mike? How are you practicing improvisation? And you went, huh, what? It struck you odd. We practice improvisation. Okay, that's a really fantastic question. And with your 40 years of teaching, how would you answer that question now? And how would you encourage students getting into jazz and trying to figure things out? What would you say to them to help guide them in their effort to learn how to practice improvisation? That's an important question. And I think that question quite often, Mike, isn't asked enough. And students aren't required to answer that question enough.
Well, this may not be the answer that you expect, but I think that a lot of it depends on it depends on where the student is in terms of their imagination. Let me back up.
Okay.
I think that jazz improv, any sort of musical improvisation, is a combination of a musical memory, a musical imagination, and you put those two together, and you have an improvisation. In other words, I imagine a memory, I imagine a melody, and most of this, for most people, this is a melodic thing. It can be a harmonic thing, but I imagine something that I've heard, and I recreate it in my mind's ear, but I recreate it differently.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so you have inspiration, identification. In other words, you have to know a little bit of what it is, and then you execute inspiration. This is from Kelly Sill. This was his idea: inspiration, identification, execution.
Mm-hmm.
And so, where is your problem? So, for some people, it's inspiration, or like they just haven't been fed enough with jazz. It's like the sound of jazz. When I wasn't necessarily working on my jazz, I was listening to a lot of records.
Right.
And I was to some degree playing along with it.
Right.
And that counted. Actually, I should have said, well, I'm just playing along with records, and that's how I was working on but that didn't seem like anything but just fun.
Yeah. Right.
So if you are wired so that, first of all, if you have a lot of sounds in your head, you may not be able to do anything except just regurgitate them out. Some people have a problem with their imagination, the ability to imagine it differently. And that's a muscle, I think, that you have to, exercise. And for some classical players who have just been working on just playing something exactly the right way over and over and over again, that's strange territory for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would have to, do things. I think that you would have to say, okay, just try to play that differently, and then then of course the execution. I think eventually most of what we get into is trying to develop the technical skills so we can execute our ideas. And that's
Mm-hmm.
scales, arpeggios,
Right.
licks,
Right.
you know,
Right.
and all that kind of stuff. And like I say, it depends on what you're doing. For some of us, we are intuitively wired so that it's easy to play something and then play it differently.
Right.
Bach's son once asked him, "Papa, where do all the melodies come from?" He said, "I can't get up without tripping over them. I can't get up in the morning without tripping over the melodies." And
Mm.
he had to invent melodies, for basically a cantata every Sunday.
Right.
So and there's a lot of sameness in those, just like there's a lot of sameness in bebop melodies.
Correct.
You have cliched things that work
Yeah.
together.
Right. Right.
So I think, like, back up, how do you work on it? I think you have to identify what you are. Are intuitively gifted to be able to play with a melody? Fine. Then do you have enough melodies in your head? If not, you just need to learn melodies. When I was first teaching, there was a guy who taught at a school. Well, I'll tell you his name because I have profound respect for him. Jerry Hahn. He was a guitar teacher, and he great guitar teacher and great guitar. And he taught improv at Wichita State. And his thing was, you learn 100 tunes that you can play, get an A. You learn 90, you get a B. You learn 80, you get a C. And at the time, I thought, what's that about? But I realized that if you learn 100 tunes, like jazz tunes,
Yeah. Yeah.
not like simple melodies, but 100 jazz tunes, you have a storehouse of vocabulary.
No question about it. Right.
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 The
Yeah.
only thing I would say that maybe a guitar player might not understand is that if you learn like this lick on guitar, but you can play it in 12 different keys just by,
Yeah.
So for a
Right.
non-guitar player, I say, okay, like, let's do those melodies. Maybe let's not do 100, but let's do 10, but in all 12 keys.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was David Baker's thing. He used to have a class
Yeah.
where the whole deal was
Yeah.
you learn these. There was a list. Pat Harbison will know the list, but it'd be like I don't know, a Yardbird Suite, and it'd be like Anthropology. Most of them were bop heads, but there might be a monk head, and then you would just assemble those licks
Yeah.
into a solo.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's the most creative thing, but there are jazz players, and I do this. Some of what we do is just assembling the vocabulary that we have.
Yeah. Right.
And
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely not. I used to have a teacher that used to say if what you play isn't worth repeating, then it probably wasn't worth saying the first time.
Yeah, that's a great thing. That's a great model.
Right. So repetition and having your vocabulary and come on. Right, Mike, it's what defines players. I can hear Oscar Peterson and say, well, that's Oscar Peterson. Well, how do I know that's Oscar Peterson? Well, he's got a vocabulary and he's got a touch that's Oscar Peterson,
Yeah.
And if everything he played was different all the time, we wouldn't be able to say, oh, that's very Oscar Peterson-ish. It becomes associated with him.
One of the things I did, and I wrote about it in the novel, Saving Charlie Parker. Just a side note, if you're to a listener who might not be aware of this, I've been writing fiction since the beginning of the pandemic. But
I want you to talk about that because it's fascinating.
Okay, well, I'll back up in the story, which is about a retired jazz professor, who falls down the stairs, hits his head, and wakes up in 1953 next to Charlie Parker. But one of the and it's not me, but one of the things that I write that guy did during the pandemic is what I did during the pandemic. Is I took the Omnibook, which is, I don't know, 108 pages of Charlie Parker solos,
Right.
and I took every bar in those solos and played them in 12 keys.
Wow.
I spent 2 or 3. I got to the point where I have no gigs, and I had nothing on the horizon. I said I have to, and I would do my my routine
Yeah.
to maintain something, but it was nothing like what I needed to do. So just out of boredom mainly, I said I'm going to do this, and I committed to do it. And I announced to people I'm going to do this, and I found it took about 5-6 months. But what I found was much of what Charlie Parker played was from lick to lick was very, very similar. You see these things, but he would change it. But no one would say, listen to Charlie Parker, oh, that's just the same stuff over and over again, because it always sounds fresh.
Correct.
And what he was doing, what he was reinventing the melodies in the spot to make them fresh. And it's rhythmic reinvention.
Ah, there you go.
And
That's
by the
right.
way, that's just another one of my theories is that all improvisation is one of two things. You're either reinventing a melody or you're ornamenting a melody. Like I could reinvent How High the Moon, ba, 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 dee. Not add one extra pitch, but I could play it completely different.
Correct.
Or
right.
I could play ornithology, which is. Did you hear that?
No.
Oh, my piano's not on.
I heard the clicking of the keys, which sounded
Oh,
really
really?
nice. Yeah, but I didn't hear any.
Is this mic working?
Yeah. Yeah, you're on, man.
I wonder if I'm going through this one. Hang on a second.
Oh, maybe you are.
No, I'm going through this one. Okay. But it sounds okay?
It sounds fine.
Okay. But anyway, that's the beginning of ornithology, which is an ornamentation of the melody to How High the Moon.
Right.
So those two things can come in there. And what he's doing is he's quoting melodies and reinventing them, and he's ornamenting them, So it's very dense. But what I found was there's a lot of the same stuff happened over and over and over again. But playing it in 12 keys was a challenge for me, because it opened up my ears.
Yeah, right.
To really be synced up with my fingers a little bit better.
Yeah. So talk about your novels. How did this all come about? This is fascinating.
Okay, September of 2020. We'd been in lockdown since March. My wife and I had moved my mother-in-law, in with us in April because we couldn't visit her in a retirement home, which was just across the street, basically.
Right.
So she started living with us, and we were also beginning to fix up a house that we own up in Kansas on a lake. That was my mother-in-law's home where Beverly grew up. And we had, in order to fix up the bathroom in the back, we had to cut up a slab in the back of the house. And I kept joking, wouldn't it be funny if we found a dead body under that slab? So, and it was just a funny thing to say. And I started writing a story about that. Okay. That indeed happened, that we dug up the slab and there was a body.
Right.
So I'd write a few chapters, just for fun. And I'd read it after dinner to the audience. The only audience I had was my wife and my mother-in-law. They were a great audience. And they said, what's next? What happens next? I said, I don't know. Let me write it tomorrow. So they just urged me. And in 3 weeks, I had a novel. Oh, and it's actually on MikeSteinel.com. If you go to the fiction button, you can see it's on YouTube. It's called The Lake House. The only problem with that title is there are a myriad.
Yeah,
there must be 12 different. There's a movie, The Lake House, it's a creepy movie, and there's a couple other things. But if you go Lake House, Part 1, 2, or 3, Mike Steinel, you'll find it.
Okay.
But it's on my website, too. I just put it up there. I did an audiobook and put the music in it. And then I did a prequel of that story. Basically, that becomes like a cold case story, trying to figure out who this guy is.
Yeah.
Turns out he's a sheriff from who's been in there since 1947.
Yeah.
He's been dead under the cement since 1947 in his cowboy shirt with the buttons. That's all that's left is the buttons, the pearl buttons. Anyway, that's a big thing. But anyway, and I wrote a prequel to that, and then I said I got to do something with jazz. So I started writing this Saving Charlie Parker, which is the novel of a jazz musician, a retired jazz professor, falls down, hits his head, wakes up in 1953, and he is able to time travel through. Eventually, he has to use opioids to induce the time travel, but he does, and he goes back and he's trying to save Charlie Parker. Eventually, from the accident that he had in 1936 that led to his addiction to heroin, because he almost broke his back and he was laid up for months, and they treated him with morphine, and he got addicted at the age of 16.
Wow.
So, for those who don't know who Charlie Parker was, he was the greatest saxophonist of the 20th century, without a doubt.
Right.
And his imprint on the vocabulary of bebop for certain, and later on was huge. But the next novel, it's not out yet, but it's written. It's Murder at Birdland, and it's time travel also. Hey, you want to hear something kind of interesting?
Yeah. You know what, Mike? This is all your imagination. See, this is that imagination you're talking about coming to the surface in a different, a different art form.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Anyway, so I decided to write this Saving Charlie Parker. I thought he's going to be a retired jazz professor, but he can't be from Denton, Texas. No, that's too close. People think it's me. So I go in Oklahoma. So I get out a map and I go, Norman. No, I know people who teach jazz in Norman. I can't do that to them. Edmond. No, I know the people there. Telephone. No, I know the people there. All those little jazz schools. They're great jazz schools in Oklahoma, a ton of them.
Yeah.
And I just said, here's one over in the corner, McAllister, Oklahoma. So okay. And I thought, I Googled it. There's a little college in McAllister. Okay, he teaches at northeastern, southwest Oklahoma State University, whatever. And so I'm writing. About 6 chapters into this, I'm rereading in Chuck Haddock's book some stuff about the early life of Charlie Parker. And in there on page 27 is this little thing. It says, Charlie Parker's mother was a housemaid for a large family in McAllister, Oklahoma.
No way.
Yes, absolutely. So I went back. That's when I went back and figured out, he's fixing up this house where Charlie Parker's mother had been. And that's why there's a that's why there's a wormhole in that house, because she was probably pregnant with Charlie Parker.
That's unbelievable. By the way, I've been through McAllister many times, so this is really freaking me out, man.
Yeah, it's a lovely town. I mean, Lake Eufaula, and I write about going up to. He goes up to Fayetteville to see a professor who teaches. Who's working on? He's an astrophysicist, and he helps him with the time to figure out what's going on with the time travel.
Wow.
Anyway,
so
everybody loves time travel, I think.
Time travel, that's it, man. So so this is like a whole new branch of creativity for you, man. Writing these books, these novels, and so do you have more of these jazz novels that are in on the drawing board that you're planning on producing?
No, but I have an idea for something different.
Uh-oh.
You want to hear it?
Yeah, of course, man.
It's AI. I'm sure somebody's doing this somewhere.
Yeah.
The guy loses his wife. It's 3 months later. There's a knock on the door. Guy just hands him this box. And he finds out that his wife had signed up for this thing where she had been interviewed hours and hours. She knew she was dying. And she's put her AI presence in this box.
Wow.
And the the guy's leery at first about what to do, and then I suppose it's kind of like that movie Her. I never
Oh
saw
yeah,
the movie
right,
Her,
right, right.
but you know this. Let me ask you something. This Beatles song. How do you feel about that Beatles song they did?
Yeah,
You know
yeah.
about this?
No, I do not know about this. What? Fill me in.
Well, there's a new Beatles song.
Oh,
It took.
I have heard about this.
I haven't heard it yet, and I'm afraid I'm going to like it. That's my problem.
I have.
Yeah, because it's my understanding they took a John Lennon demo. He was working on a song,
Uh huh.
and they were able to add through AI the rest of the band, the sounds from the rest of the band. You know,
That. It's pretty remarkable, right?
it's very scary.
It's very scary. It's very scary. That's why I'm old school, man. I'm old school. I just sit here and practice the piano. I'm old school, man. I don't I don't branch.
I'm thinking that it's going to eventually put the premium on people wanting to hear live music.
Yeah, the
Because what can
pendulum
you
was.
trust?
That's right. There you go. What
What's
can you try?
real?
Yeah, what's real? Yeah, right. So, okay, so they can go, listeners can go to your website.
Yes.
They can get your books, your novels, your fictions, links to
There's a
that,
store there. They can order all that
yeah,
stuff.
right there. And I'm assuming they can get your jazz education books as well that you've done over the years.
There's two websites. There's MikeSteinel.com. The store is the same for both of them.
Okay.
And there's also SavingCharlieParker.com, which is has a little bit more background about the making of that book. There's a really great cover on that book by an artist named Rudy Brown, and there's a little bit about him, and there's a little bit about the books, the resources that I used to. I did a lot of. I think if people know, even people that think they know a lot about Charlie Parker, might find some new things
Yeah.
in this book, like the fact that in 1947, Charlie Parker, when he first got out of Camarillo, records at a studio on Western in L.A., and then goes to a party at Lester Young's family home. And I'd read that in a book of Lester Young's family home. Well, it turns out Lester Young was on the road, but he had a family. He was part of a large family, and his brother was a drummer. And they had a party for Bird after that thing. It was like Bird's back party, like a welcome back party.
Right.
And
right.
there's a little notation in there in the source that I used, which was the Charlie Parker diary. It says, a jam session ensues and a young John Coltrane takes part.
Wow.
1947. He's like 20. So I wrote this whole party scene
that's awesome.
Bird playing with Coltrane, or Coltrane getting to play with Bird.
Yeah.
So
are you
little
still
things
doing
like that?
Well, it's fascinating. I think it's so cool. I mean, you're opening, you're developing a whole new jazz genre here with your novels and your fictions, man. This is pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, I enjoy. I enjoyed doing it. It's as much fun making it as you're not going to make a ton of money on this kind of stuff, any of it in music.
Right.
I enjoy it. I enjoy the writing while I'm doing it, as much as, in some ways, as much as writing a piece of music.
Yeah,
it's very similar.
Right.
Very
similar process. Yeah.
Trying to get a structure, and like I work pretty hard. This last one, I really think has a good wordplay. I think the wordplay is good.
Yeah.
In it, and so it's fun to hear in your head. And I'll do an audio book for that too. I haven't got around to it. I'm trying to gear up. That's gruesome.
Yeah. So I'm definitely going to check it out. I'm definitely going to read it, and I'm going to give you a little feedback. I'm going to let you know what I think of it after I read it.
Okay.
So, hey, Mike, are you still doing some teaching at North Texas? I know you're officially retired, but
no, I'm not. I'm doing no. they're nice enough not to even ask me. I guess that's the way I look at it. Oh, thanks for not asking me.
So you don't go up the campus and walk around the halls and have the kids ask who the hell's that old guy walking around here?
That's kind of painful. No, I don't know anybody up there anymore except the teachers, and they're nice. But
Right.
no, I've got a lot of stuff coming up. I'm doing an all-state band next spring. Next spring's pretty big. I'm doing a couple of jazz festivals with my group. I'm doing Ohio Music Educators, 2 clinics, Kentucky Music Educators, 2 clinics.
Oh,
and then in between those, I'm playing concerts in Cincinnati and Columbus. And, were you in school with Pete Mills?
Yes.
Pete Mills?
Yes.
We're doing a concert together, and it should be fun. I'm looking forward to that trip, and playing, like I say, some local gigs and also some jazz festivals.
Yeah.
And
that's fantastic.
Something up in Oklahoma.
Yeah. Something that you didn't mention, you used to do, didn't you do some of the Aebersold clinics too? Weren't you part of?
I did those for years. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah. So you were part of that whole crew doing all the Aebersold camps,
I stopped doing them once I started running my own camp here. It just got to be too busy.
Right.
I tried to do both, but I meant, Darla. Remember Darla?
Oh, yes.
Secretary.
How's she doing? Is she still?
I saw her at something recently, but I'd be out of town the week before my camp's going to start, and she'd be calling me night and day, like with problems, fires to put out. It was just too much stress. So I said, I'm just going to do the camps, and I eventually had 3 camps that I did right here. I did a trumpet camp and a combo camp and a composer's workshop. So.
Wow,
yeah,
it's fantastic. Well, man, I'm so glad that you're keeping more than active, man. You're out there doing it. You're writing. You're doing these, camps and clinics, and it's fantastic, Mike.
Yeah, I'm having a good time. Just trying to stay healthy and keep on top of things, and and there's I got a lot of relaxing to do too, so that's good.
Yeah,
it's a completely different world. I mean, in a way, retirement didn't exist for a long time. People had to work and work and work.
Yeah.
And now with Social Security, it's a brilliant invention. Thank you, whoever thought of it. And we have a grandson. Do we have a grandson now?
No. I have 4 kids. My oldest is a junior in college right now. So, but no grandbabies, man.
Oh, that'll happen.
Oh,
your odds are good with 4.
I know. I'm just not ready to be called grandpa yet, man.
Oh, it's the greatest thing in the world, man.
Oh, I bet it is. I have no doubt, man. I have no doubt. So
let me tell you something about being grandpa. I experienced when I was first came to North Texas, I was pretty young comparatively. I wasn't a whole lot older than you guys.
Right. And, I remember.
And, there was some, at that age, you guys were pretty frisky. There's some pushback, and then I realized that what that was is, I was a little older. So I was dad, I wasn't your age, but I was dad, and dad's never right about anything.
Right.
But then eventually I became grandpa, and all of a sudden I know I would just teachers would say, well, I'm having trouble with it. Oh, my students are great. They're so respectful, And I realized, oh yeah, now I'm grandpa. Everybody likes grandpa. They don't want to hurt grandpa.
Yeah, they don't want to be. Nobody's going to be mean to grandpa.
Yeah, we're not going to. He's got oatmeal on his chin. We're not going to say anything.
Yeah.
So that's what happened, and so anyway, it's interesting. I think. I think it's really challenging, right? Just to be real serious, for musicians right now, I think this is a very challenging time to try to figure out, how you're gonna, make a viable living. And it's really interesting, all the different things that have changed and might be really changing in the last in the next 5 years, you know.
Right. Right.
Distribution.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I haven't quite figured it out.
Yeah. I'm not sure anyone has yet. So,
Well, you're doing good.
well, man,
Gotcha.
I'll tell you what, I'm having fun. You know, the Dallas School of Music, we've been in business here now for 33 years, 34 years, and now I got this jazz piano skills uh,
Yeah,
adventure going, which is really
that's
a blast because
fantastic.
I'm reconnecting with great folks like yourself. You know, I had Dan Hurley on jazz piano skills a couple years
Yeah.
ago. It was great. And Jamie Abersol's been a guest uh, uh, on jazz piano skills, and JB Dias, you know, has been on, and I mean, just a lot of great folks. So it's been a lot of fun.
Well, I enjoyed being on. I'm honored to be part of this. So
Well,
I'll look
Mike,
forward to seeing
yeah,
it.
and I want to make sure that we get. I'm going to post all your contact information in the show notes here for all the listeners to be able to uh, get a hold of your resources, your educational resources, which are fantastic. To check out your novels and the fiction that you're doing now, which is so intriguing. I'm just thrilled for you on that. I think that's awesome. And then, man, you got to promise me that you'll come back on, man. It'd be great for us to maybe take a jazz topic and explore it together. Maybe some kind of improvisational concept or idea, and be able to kick the can around a little bit with that idea and see what we come up with that would be helpful for jazz piano skills listeners, especially you being a horn player. I always love having horn players on jazz piano skills because I tell piano students all the time that if you really want to improve your melodic playing as a pianist, start listening to horn players. Um,
Yeah.
you know, it's so important. So it'd be great to have you back on, and we can pick a topic and kind of do a deep dive together. That would be a lot of fun.
Can't wait.
All right, Mike. Thank you so much, man, for being carving time out of your day at jazz and being on Jazz Piano Skills. On behalf of all the listeners, man, thanks a ton. It's great to reconnect with you.
It's been my pleasure.
Thanks, Mike.
Bye bye.